This is Greg Strange at the Institute of Directors with the latest in our series of IoD business vidcasts, and with me is the IoD Director General Miles Templeman. Miles, we're in the final week before Christmas. Still lots of bad news headlines about. You've been trying to take the stock of where businesses are in this country. What's your take on it at the moment?
Well, overall, obviously very difficult, but many companies are reporting that their results to date are not as bad as the press would have us believe. I've been out to a number of retailers, and although sales are down, they're running a bit below last year, but not well below last year. And some of the shopping centres are doing quite well.
Is it then that we run the risk of a self-fulfilling prophecy, that if we continue to get bad news headlines, it will be much worse than it is?
There's always a danger of that. But I think we have to recognise now that we are deep in recession. So the question is, how long, how deep, how can we get out of it? How can good companies survive and make the best of it? That's really the issue now. But definitely it's not as gloomy as the headlines would have us believe.
Well, how can we get out of it? We've seen some companies laying off workers in big numbers, in the car industry particularly. We've also seen talk of pay cuts.
Well, I think one of the areas that a number of small and medium companies are exploring, and some of them are already doing, is actually to go to the workforce and say, we don't want to make redundancies. One of the options we can do, and do it early rather than late, is to actually have a universal pay cut of around 10%. And a number of companies have now implemented that with good understanding and, if you like, almost a positive response that people realise that this is a way of saving jobs.
Is business confident that the government or governments internationally have got any answers to get us out of this?
Well, I think the net answer to that would be no. I mean, they would say the government helped get us into it. All the credit schemes that the government's trying to implement to make the banks lend better don't seem to be working that well. That isn't all the government's fault. The banks are obviously very nervous. But I think the government could do more to get the banks to get that credit scheme, particularly to smaller companies. We get a lot of bad feedback on that still, even though it's improving a little bit. But meanwhile, I think companies have got to take stock themselves, save costs where they can. Obviously, there are some redundancies and they should be handled as well as possible. But I think this idea of getting the workforce, particularly the better paid members of the workforce, to agree to some sort of pay reduction is a good first step.